Netanyahu believes if you have a Palestinian state in anywhere approximating the 67 borders, the potential for peace is zero, that the capacity for Israel to maintain its security, even in the state it's in now, will be radically diminished.
The White House had not briefed Netanyahu, and as it turned out, he was planning a trip to Washington the next day.
From Netanyahu's point of view, he was convinced that this was an attempt to ambush him, embarrass him, and put him in a situation where, the president was, from Netanyahu's point of view, weakening Israel's negotiating position by declaring a stance on the 67 lines. And so he was furious about it.
When Netanyahu landed, his ambassador could tell there would be trouble.
I'd never seen him like that coming out of the plane. There was no smile, there's no wave. And you can almost imagine steam coming out of his ears.
Just as in their first meeting, the press was summoned.
All right, everybody set up? All good? Let me first of all welcome once again Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I want to
But this time, Bibi Netanyahu would lecture Barack Obama on the peace process and Hamas.
Israel obviously cannot be asked to negotiate with a government that is backed by the Palestinian version of Al-Qaeda.
You're watching President Obama there with his face in his hand, and you can tell it's not going over well. This is his house, and to be lectured in his office rankles.
Israel cannot negotiate with a Palestinian government that is backed by Hamas. Hamas is the president.
Watching it unfold, Chief of Staff Bill Daley.
Bill Daley is standing next to me, and he's going, outrageous, outrageous. And he's just, it's like he's almost levitating.
And because, Mr. President, history will not give the Jewish people another chance.
Obama was treated to a lecture on Jewish and Israeli history that just went on and deeply offended Obama and his people.
It's the ancient nation of Israel. And we've been around for almost 4,000 years. We've experienced struggle and suffering like no other people.
There was a sense of gall. What gall?
After the public dressing down, Obama faced a choice about how to respond, how hard to push Netanyahu.
I think Obama realized at that time that the price that he was paying for trying to ram something down Netanyahu's throat that Netanyahu didn't want to have rammed down his throat wasn't worth it for him.
The Palestinians who had once cheered Obama's election now watched with disappointment as the peace process not only faltered, but Israel continued to build settlements.
His approach has been to send signals, but to never follow up his signals with actual action. He didn't back up his statements against settlements with actual actions and saying to the Israelis, you have to make a choice now. Do you want these settlements or do you want the money that we give you every year? It's always just been one signal after another signal after another signal. And this is an area that deals well with signals. This is an area that requires concrete action.
He proved to the Israeli public, look, when I defend you, even against the strongest person in the world, the President of the United States, we still get what we need in defense terms, and we still get this huge check from the United States. He managed to prove that Israel didn't pay a price.
Israel has many friends and allies, but when they're mistaken, it's my obligation to speak out clearly and openly and say so.
If Netanyahu, as expected, continues to be the prime minister, we can expect a continued tense relationship with the Obama administration.
Netanyahu would capitalize on his defiance of Obama as he ran for re-election in 2015. He publicly lashed out at the president over his deal with Iran to curtail its nuclear program.
The deal currently on the table is deeply flawed. Instead of preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons, this impending deal will facilitate that development.
He said it was a grave security risk to Israel that would also fuel Iran's backing of Hamas. It played well to his base on the Israeli right. He took an even harder line on the Palestinian issue.
נגעתי בתוקף, אני מתנגד בתוקף לחלוקת ירושלים. בתוקף מתנגד לחזרה לקווי 67. בתוקף מתנגד לזכות השיבה. ולא רק זה, תסתכל הלכה למעשה. אנחנו במשך שנים, אני עומד מול כל מסע הלחצים הזה, לא נסוגותי סנטימטר. המשכתי לבנות בשכונות של ירושלים. מעולם לא הסכמתי לחלק את ירושלים. מעולם לא הסכמתי לסגת לקווי 67, וגם לא אסכים.
He came out plain and simple and said, there will not be a Palestinian state. And that was the true face of Netanyahu.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party has won what's being called a stunning re-election victory.
השגנו ניצחון גדול לליכוד.
Netanyahu's election victory emboldened his approach to the Palestinians. He would take advantage of the fact they were divided between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank.
He wanted to divide. And he wanted to make sure that he doesn't have to negotiate any deal where you would connect between the territories and Gaza.
From an Israeli standpoint, it makes sense. Divide and rule, keep the West Bank and Gaza separate. That's the best way to prevent a Palestinian state. Keep them both weak, but not weak enough where they collapse.
Netanyahu made a particularly fateful gamble when it came to Hamas. With Gaza under blockade, he allowed the wealthy Gulf state Qatar to give Hamas hundreds of millions of dollars in assistance.
He allowed Qatar to pay Hamas massive bags of cash in dollars to buy quiet, to buy cargoes from Hamas.
This money was spent on digging tunnels and buying rockets and producing weapons, now killing Israelis. While Netanyahu was telling us that he was our great protector, he was actually contributing, not directly, to building Hamas and making it a regional power. Israel has responded to a rocket attack from Gaza with 3 punishing airstrikes.
Israel's military said the strikes were a response to a rocket fired into southern Israel.
Netanyahu has denied he was empowering Hamas and pointed to repeated military offensives in Gaza against the group, a containment strategy known as mowing the grass.
This notion that every so often there would need to be predictable rounds of violence, mowing the grass, as Israelis call it, only to result in reinstating the status quo that existed before the violence, was an untenable situation. I and others had argued that eventually something's going to give. There's going to be an escalation that spirals out of control. The situation becomes so dire in humanitarian terms in Gaza that there's a bigger explosion than anyone had anticipated. And that's precisely what happened.
Thank you.
With the Palestinians divided and Netanyahu pursuing a strategy keeping it that way, a new president with a new approach to the region came to power.
Thank you. I speak to you today as a lifelong supporter and true friend of Israel.
Donald Trump boasted he'd be the first U.S. president to broker an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal.
Donald Trump neither knew nor cared about the history of the Middle East or the failed efforts at Middle East peacemaking. What he knew, or what he thought he knew, was that there was a big deal that was looming out there, and that if you could make it, you'd get a Nobel Peace Prize and the deal of the century.
Trump surrounded himself with a team that included his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was a family friend of Netanyahu, and David Friedman, a controversial figure who supported Israeli settlements.
You had these advisors on Israel, all of them Jewish, all of them strong supporters of Israel, none of them with any particular background in negotiation in the region in terms of peace talks, but with very, very developed positions and points of view.
He was anxious to see if there could be a peace deal reached between Israel and the Palestinians. I will tell you candidly, I was skeptical of that from the beginning.
The White House, Netanyahu has been full of praise for the president.
Just 1 month into his term, Trump invited Netanyahu to the White House to discuss the possibilities.
For Netanyahu and his advisors, this was first and foremost a moment of opportunity. Trump seemed to them volatile, unpredictable, but perhaps unpredictable in ways that would benefit Israel.
Bibi and I have known each other a long time. A smart man, great negotiator, and I think we're going to make a deal. It might be a big...
Trump gave Netanyahu an early nod in his favor, saying he would be open to something other than a two-state solution.
I'm looking at two-state and one state, and I like the one that both parties like. I'm very happy with the one that both parties like. I can live with either one.
It shocked a lot of people. I mean, Trump was not of the conviction that there needed to be a two-state solution. He thought that there could be any number of ways where this, conflict could be resolved, and the two-state solution was one of them. But he was certainly not pushing it.
That is really a sea change in American policy, because basically going back for multiple presidents, the idea of an independent Palestinian state as part of an ultimate solution or resolution of this conflict has always been the idea, and he's thrown all that out the window.
We expect President Trump any moment now.
Trump would soon follow that up with an even more surprising announcement, fulfilling a long-time wish of Netanyahu's.
Today, we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital. If you put the American embassy there, you're seemingly putting your foot on the scale saying we take Israel's side in this.
This is a historic moment.
We told him from the day he started doing all that, from the first day, there will be no contact policy with you. You are completely and utterly boycotted. You shall not be a trusted mediator in this. You are disqualified.
Palestinians took to the streets to protest.
The U.S. knows that Jerusalem is the most sensitive issue. That was a move by the U.S. in a way to tell Israel that it has Jerusalem, and deciding to have Israel pocket this before starting negotiations, then you definitely do not want to have negotiations in the first place. You do not want to see a peace process ignited in the first place, and you ain't interested in a two-state solution altogether.
Please join me now in welcoming Ambassador David Friedman.
In May of 2018, Friedman, Kushner, Netanyahu, and nearly 1,000 guests gathered in Jerusalem for the official ceremony marking the move of the U.S. Embassy.
Jerusalem is the heart and soul of the Jewish people. Even the most left-wing Jewish prayer books contain a prayer that God will restore the Jewish people to Jerusalem. So for the most important country in the world, the most powerful country in the world, to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the fact that that hadn't been done for so long was just an open wound. It is now my great honor to call upon the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu.
What a glorious day. Remember this moment. President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history.
I was actually there. I was anchoring our broadcast from the embassy in Jerusalem. And I remember I looked around at the crowd. It was just the crowd from one part of the political map. You didn't see there a lot of people from the opposition. You didn't see a lot of people from the peace camp or people who were used to working with the administration. It was a party of the right.
We are in Jerusalem and we are here to stay. And our brave soldiers are protecting the borders of Israel as we speak today. We salute them all.
That day, around 50 miles south at the border with Gaza, tens of thousands of Palestinians had gathered to protest the embassy move and Israel's ongoing blockade. Hamas urged protesters to break through the border fence. Israeli soldiers responded with rifle fire, killing more than 60 people.
What the embassy move symbolized to Palestinians was that they were not going to have a state with its capital in Jerusalem. Because now the President of the United States had said that only Israel had a legitimate claim to Jerusalem and that it would remain eternally Israel's capital.
Unfortunately,